Oh,
Welcome in, everyone. As you guys are coming in, we're waiting just a little bit longer for a couple of people to come in before we get started. Um, Feel free to read this poster that's on screen right now, and we'll get started in just a little bit.
Well, hello, everybody. I think we'll get started now. We just had a few issues, but we're going to move forward. And I want to welcome everyone or welcome you back to the final day of our webinar, Looking Back, Moving Forward, Law, Policy, and Environmental Justice. My name is Giovanna DiChiaro, and I'm a professor of environmental studies and the coordinator of the program on environmental justice and climate resilience here at Swarthmore College. Along with my two wonderful co-organizers of this webinar, Ms. Zulene Mayfield and Dr. Chris Mele, who will introduce themselves in a moment, I'm delighted to welcome you to this third panel titled Moving Forward. So yesterday we had a full day of conversations focusing on how far we have come in fighting to bring about environmental justice. And we heard some very powerful and moving reflections from some of the frontline actors in Chester and their lawyers and advocates who in 1996 filed Circle versus Seif, the first civil rights lawsuit in the country charging environmental racism. We also learned about how the fight is continuing today on many fronts in Chester City, a sister city, Newark, New Jersey, and in other communities across the country who are using environmental law, local zero waste ordinances, and local and state policy as powerful community organizing tools to help to, quote, change the rules of the game and to mobilize people to action, as environmental justice leader Maria Lopez Nunez put it yesterday. So today our panelists will help us to think about what we need to do to keep moving forward. And they'll be sharing with us their thoughts on what they see as the next steps and the future visions for advancing environmental justice and for building a just transition locally and beyond. If you were unable to make it to yesterday's panels, the recordings will be available on the conference website that Oswaldo will drop into the chat in just a moment. So to start off our webinar today, I would like to invite Oswaldo Morales Solorzano, who is the Sustainability and Engaged Scholarship Fellow at Swarthmore College, to offer us a land acknowledgement. Oswaldo.
Thank you, Giovanna. Though virtual, this webinar is being hosted by Swarthmore College, which sits on Lenapehoking, the land of the Lenape. The name Lenape means original people, and the Lenape are seen by many in the region to be the grandfather people of Turtle Island. Lenapehoking is home to the four directions, which we honor: the grandfather of the north, who brings us land and physical form to the Creator's vision; the grandfather of the east, who brings the wind and through that brings breath of life. The grandmother of the South, who brings fire and spirit. The grandfather in the West, who controls the water and looks over death. Lenapehoking is home to animals and plants. It is home to the muskrat who swam down to the bottoms of the ocean to grab mud to spread on the turtle, who grew to become the island. It is home to sumac, whose bright red flowers can be used as dyes or aroma for tobacco, and sassafras, whose leaves can be used in perfumes and in teas. It is home to the waters that bring us sustenance and the land that grows us. Lenapehoking is home to much more living and non-living beings than we have time in our lives to speak about. It is expansive, reaching across the lands now called New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New York. It's important to highlight that colonialism is not an event of the past, but rather an ongoing structure. Through false treaties, forced coercion, and many other violent actions, Lenape have been pushed away from their land. Today, Lenape are spread out across Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Ontario, and many other places in North America. And through all of this attempted erasure, Lenape have nonetheless remained in community and in story with one another, and so we must understand the ways that we must not situate Lenape in the past, but rather in the forefront of our future. Conversations about land are one of the first steps in dismantling ongoing legacies of colonial violence and honoring Indigenous resilience. We express our deep gratitude to the Lenape for shepherding this land and invite you all to think about the ways you can continue to learn about the land here at Swarthmore, in Chester, or wherever else you may be.
Thank you so much, Oswaldo, for that beautiful and multi-layered land acknowledgement. I would also like to acknowledge our co-sponsors who have generously supported this webinar, the Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility, the Environmental Studies Program, and the Office of Sustainability at Swarthmore College, and the Baldy Center for Law and Social Policy, and the Digital Scholarship Studio and Network at University at Buffalo. We're also deeply grateful to the college staff and the students who helped to design and construct our website and who have helped to make this webinar run smoothly. So now I want to turn the floor over to Ms. Zulene Mayfield, Chairperson of Chester Residents Concerned for Quality Living and co-organizer of our webinar, to welcome everyone and to let people know to let people know who are local about the march today. Zulene?
I'm sorry. Hi, good morning, everybody. I'll be on screen in a minute.
Okay.
We want to welcome everybody today. This is the last of our conference, and I'm sure that it's going to be a very productive one. I am the chairperson of Chester Residents Concerned for Quality Living. You'll also hear us call it Circle because the name is so long, but Circle has been around since 1992. We formed due to the proliferation of countless waste facilities or waste processing people that wanted to come into Chester. And we've been together ever since. We are still in the battlefield. Sometimes you take one step up and you get 3 steps back, but we're still moving forward. So I welcome you. I hope that we have a very spirited dialogue, and let's see where we can go from here. Thank you so much, Giovanna.
Thank you, Zulene. So I'd like to now, actually, Oswaldo, if you could just put the screen up of the march, so we can just let people know that the Environmental Justice March is happening in Chester. For those of you who are local, to be able to, we'll probably wrap up a little bit early today, so that we people who are going to the march can get there.
And this march is because we technically don't celebrate Earth Day until we achieve cleaner air. We will continue to march. We're calling it Environmental Justice Day because that is what we're seeking. We're seeking equity. We're just seeking the right to breathe. So that is the purpose of this march. It is celebratory. We have enough other issues that we can be sad about, but we want this to be a big turnout. We want people to come and to experience what the residents experience, but also support each other. Circle needs all the support it can get. People say that you need a village to raise a child, but you also need a broad-based village to save a child. And that's what this march is about. And we hope to see you there.
Thank you so much, Zulene. So I want to turn the floor over now to Dr. Chris Miller, who will introduce himself and lay out some of the prompt questions.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thanks for attending. I know Saturday mornings are often precious for a lot of folks, and looking forward to the event this afternoon. My name is Chris Maley. I'm a professor of sociology at the University of Buffalo, and it's been been very lucky and feeling very honored to be working with Zulene and Giovanna on putting this conference together over the course of the past several months. I want to start with just a very quick overview of what I got out of yesterday's two panels, because I think it kind of sets up where we are today. As Giovanna mentioned, the first panel was really looking back, but it was a kind of a new look in my mind at a case that has been studied quite a bit in academic circles, and that is Circle versus Sipe, and the case that had a novel use of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. During that session, the panelists shared their recollections of the suit, the context of the time in which the suit was launched, the innovative strategies that was retold by the two attorneys that were present at the panel yesterday, and the limits of using Title VI that are imposed by federal court rulings since, and then some of the more recent federal opportunities that are appearing, but whose effects, of course, have remained to be seen. But one of the main takeaways from the panel was the clear recognition that using courts is a particular strategy based on a model of petitioning the state on the state's terms, where an individual actor such as Circle petitions the state to address the claim, but the institutional requirements really shape the pathway in which that claim is made. In short, the demands for environmental justice are, in that process, kind of compelled to submit to some of the legal requirements and rulings. In panel one, we learned that law is just a tool that might chip away and gain some benefit and good benefit for an organization, but clearly it's not the only path, or even at times the preferred path. In panel two, we took a very different look at what's going on in the present and the current initiatives of the environmental justice movements, particularly in Chester and in Newark, New Jersey, and the role of student organizations as support, such as C4. The efforts included, as Giovanna mentioned, zero waste ordinances and the passage of the strongest environmental justice law in the country. The clear takeaway for me from panel two was first the recognition of no singular reliance on a particular or unique strategy, such as petitioning courts. Instead, movements now draw on a number of tools: legislative, legal, direct action, et cetera. And some of these prove more effective at particular times than at others, and organizations need to be nimble, flexible, and ready to act at what's at hand. Second, the movements are based less on individual actors acting alone, as we saw, for example, in the idea of petitioning the court, and more on working together around aligned principles of justice, building alliances, coalitions, and networking. What is to be gained in the process of movement building ties these connections together, opening up new spaces for new ideas as well, reaching beyond particular places like Newark and Chester, but in alliance together. Lastly, when it comes to law and policy, the panel concluded that both are most useful when a community itself determines and drives the process according to its needs. And I said lastly, but there's one lastly, we also learned that the role of the legal profession needs to bend in the way of justice that's defined by the communities themselves, not by some academic and institutional notion of the law preset. This panel is really our capstone, and we're excited about it because it's really the kind of future-oriented. What we're going to be asking in this particular panel is, what is your vision of the next steps of the EJ movement and moving EJ forward in general? With regards to law and policy making, what are some of the creative and more practical ways to advance Circle's goals and the EJ movement, again, more broadly? How can we expand coalition building, and to what end? How are environmental justice and, for example, Indigenous organizations building diverse coalitions in relation to their strategies? And if you could speak to how your own organization or the organizations that you collaborate with draw on more critical approaches to community engagement, intersectionality, and supporting community-driven solidarity. If you have time, you might want to offer some advice that you would give to folks attending this webinar rather, students, community residents, researchers, lawyers, teachers, etc. So I look forward to a fruitful conversation based on these and any other items that you want to add to today's agenda. Turn it back to Giovanna.
Thank you, Chris. Now I just want to turn it briefly back to Oswaldo, who'll give us some important logistical information about the webinar today.
Yeah, so as you guys are listening to the panelists and listening to everyone speak, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the question and answer section as they come up. I'm actually looking at the Zoom chat from my own phone right now, and there's a little button that says Q&A, and if you click on that, it'll let you ask a question, and those questions will be sent directly to all of the panelists, and that'll be the easiest way for us to be able to look at and answer all of the questions. We'll probably answer them live, though if any of them are short enough, we could even get a text response. The chat is a little hard to follow in webinars, so I think really do try to use the Q&A feature. So all you really have to do is, again, click the Q&A button and it'll let you ask a question. You can put your question in, you can even make it anonymous if you feel called to, but ask questions as they come up, and then sort of at the end of all the speakers, we'll be able to wrap up and go through all of those questions for you guys.
Great, thank you, Oswaldo. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and we may shuffle people around it depending upon when some of our panelists are able to join the webinar. So first, we have Ms. Kearni Warren, who is a Chester resident and the Philadelphia area organizer for the Energy Justice Network. Next, we will have Dr. Kyle Powys Whyte, who's professor of philosophy and community sustainability in the School of Environment and Sustainability at the University of Michigan. We're hoping that Dr. Ana Baptista will be able to join us, who's the professor of professional practice in the Milano School of Policy, Management, and Environment at the New School in New York City. Then we will have Ms. Jacqui Patterson, who is the director of the Chisholm Legacy Project and the former director of the NAACP's Environmental and Climate Justice Program. After Jacqui will be Ms. Dorcas Gilmore, who is the principal attorney at Gilmore Kandar law firm in Baltimore, Maryland, and a member of the Just Transition Lawyering Network. And finally, we'll hear from Ms. Carol Kazeem, who is a Chester resident, activist, and candidate for Pennsylvania State Representative. So, and Zulene, of course, will, as our chairperson of Circle and co-organizer, will also respond throughout the webinar presentation. So let's start with Kearni. If you could just please start us off by sharing with us as a resident and as a local activist and organizer, your goals and visions for bringing environmental justice to Chester, to the Philadelphia area and beyond. Kearni.
Thank you, Giovanna, and everyone at Swarthmore and Miss Zulene for having me today. I am a resident of Chester, so this work is very important to me, and it is very personal to me. I live here, but I was not aware of the major impacts that incineration was having. And I can't even remember how I got involved with Miss Zulene, some kind of a way. I don't even remember, but I got involved, and now it has become part of my life's work. So when we talk about a just transition, it's not simply a word. It's a model that we need to use, and it's defined as a principle, a process, and a practice. And in order for us to move forward to end environmental devastation and to end environmental racism, we have to be willing to look at our ugly and racist past, which has violently stolen from and continues to oppress Black and Indigenous people. Climate destruction is rooted in white supremacy, colonization, capitalism, and patriarchy. So it is not a coincidence that environmental justice communities look the way they do, or the reasons why. Environmental justice communities are a result of the effects of redlining. The EPA defines environmental justice communities as 20% or more of the residents living at or below the federal poverty line, and or 30% or more of the population self-identifies as Black, Indigenous, people of color. So it's important to note that both characteristics do not have to be present when speaking about an environmental justice community. Black and Indigenous represented communities are often overburdened, meaning that there are issues on top of issues on top of issues. And then we have environmental destruction to add onto that. They are frontline communities, and residents and activists on the grassroots level must be heard and given space to create and implement solutions towards a just transition. Frontline solutions must be inclusive. The process and outcome of a regenerative economy, which is based on ecological restoration, community protection, equitable partnerships, justice, and a full and fair participatory process. We have to also repudiate greenwashing and false solution terms like trash to steam, waste to energy, energy from waste, resource recovery facilities, among others, that make their harmful practices sound good and further harm our communities. When we speak about a just transition, the just transition principles that it's based on, there are 8. One is the belief that we can live well and live better without having the expense of others, without having to harm people, putting people over profits. The rights of people, communities, and nature must outweigh the rights of the individual. A just transition relies on human potential and creates meaningful work. A just transition upholds self-determination, meaning the right to participate in decisions that impact communities' lives. The people who are most affected by the extractive economy, the frontline workers and fence line communities, must have the power to shape their economies as producers and consumers. A just transition works against and transforms the current and historic social inequities based on race, class, gender, immigrant status, and other forms of oppression, and reclaim capital and resources. A just transition requires regenerative ecological economies by building up local food systems, local clean energy, and small scale production that are sustainable and economically and ecologically. Just transition must advance ecological resilience to reduce resource consumption and restore biodiversity. A just transition retains culture and tradition, including reparations for the land that has been stolen and destroyed by capitalism, patriarchy, genocide, and slavery. It calls for a local, regional, national, and global solidarity that confronts imperialism and militarism. And finally, a just transition builds what we already know. It uses traditional knowledge of the residents. So when we speak about organizing in reference to a just transition, we must begin with educating our frontline communities with facilitators that resemble them. It makes the most impact and it can result in connectedness. As a former union leader, I know that in order to move people, we must first educate, reiterate, and then activate. The community isn't motivated unless they feel a connection to an issue and that they have to get mad about it in order to take action. So as we organize for a just transition, we have to push for a zero waste society, which is the idea of reducing waste utilization. And it includes the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle, which also includes composting. Zero waste is defined as the conservation of all resources by means of responsible production, consumption, reuse, and recovery of products, packaging, and materials without burning, like we do in Chester at the incinerator, and with no discharges to land, water, or air that threaten the environment or human health. Chester has a major waste problem. We know this. We burn waste here at Covanta at the incinerator, and people dump waste. And then our local government has had issues with picking up residents' waste on time during scheduled trash dates. So Chester is ripe for green infrastructure. In addition to zero waste, we should move forward towards a sustainable and circular economy, creating good union green jobs that directly involve or indirectly supports one of the strategies of a circular economy, which is a model of production and consumption involving sharing, leasing, reusing, repairing, refurbishing, and recycling existing materials and products for as long as possible. So an example is design, construction, education, textiles. There are industries already in place where we can create a circular economy from. Again, Chester has a competitive advantage and is a perfect location for a green economy, including transportation. So as we fight for a just transition, we have to fight against gentrification, which does not include the principles of a just transition. We want our communities to be healthy, be safe, be clean, be green. We don't mind modernization, but what gentrification does, it extracts, it steals, it takes away all of the traditions that and history that were once in a community in order to benefit others. And so in order to have a just transition, we must first want and seek justice. The goal is to every day get closer to meeting our energy needs in transition with conservation, efficiency, wind, solar, and ocean power. So what I could share to others, to people who are watching, to students, to young people, first, research where your trash goes, right? There are communities that are accepting your trash that is aiding environmental devastation, and it is mostly in overburdened, frontline, fence line communities of Black, Indigenous people of color. To the students, to law students, help draft policies and resolutions that beginning on a municipal level, your local city, borough, township, and then working towards political legislation on the state and federal levels, help pass ordinances, clean air acts. Students play a big role in this fight, and Ms. Zulene and Swarthmore has been doing a great job with engaging students so that they are actually learning real life practices that will put them in place and give them, that will catapult them as they further their education and then move out into the real world, their learning and research and activism will truly help communities like Chester move into a just transition, and in the environmental racism and environmental devastation that me, Ms. Zulene, and other residents in Chester and communities like Chester all over this country are subjected to.
Thank you so much, Kearni. I'm wondering if you might want to just briefly comment on your campaign as the first candidate representing the Green Party in Chester last year.
Sure. Chester has been my home for generations. My great-grandmother migrated here from the South. And so growing up in Chester, with different generations, there's a different vision and experience with Chester. So I was lucky enough to have the experiences from a great-grandmother, a grandmother, parents, and then my generation, and to see the changes that have occurred. So when I decided to run for office in Chester on the Green Party, it was really to affect change, because we are not only fighting systemic issues, we're fighting our local government, which is really hard to do, because a lot of the changes that we want as residents, it doesn't appear that our local government wants the same for this city. Our local government, they don't tell us when businesses are coming. The majority of the businesses that do come are harmful to us. There's lack of opportunity here. There's lack of transparency here. There's lack of services here. And I wanted to change that, or to at least help cultivate that change. We deserve to live like any other community. Swarthmore is right next door, Brookhaven, Media. Unfortunately, we in Chester, we have to leave our city to go out and put money into other municipalities for the things that we need, our daily resources. I knew that Chester has a historical roots. It is full of culture. Martin Luther King Jr. went to seminary here. He preached his first sermon here. There were so many entertainment and Black entrepreneurship businesses here. And I wanted to bring that back for our youth. There's lack of jobs here for our youth. And so after traveling as a young person to different zip codes and seeing the way that different people live, and seeing that those different people who are living in a different way weren't necessarily all wealthy. Some of them had the same types of jobs that my family members had. So I just couldn't understand as a child why communities were different, even if people had the same type of jobs. So that made me want to fight for change here in Chester. And running as a Green Party candidate, I pushed for green infrastructure because I know that studies have shown that where communities are clean and healthy, it changes the attitudes of the residents. You can't expect people to be happy and feel motivated every day when you don't live in a place or neighborhood that is inspiring, when you don't have a job to go to. I know when there have been times in my life when I wasn't working, when I was unemployed, where I didn't feel good about myself. And so I could only imagine people who are unemployed and who may not even have a lot of skills. It's one thing to be unemployed and you're looking for a job and you know you have the skill set for jobs, but then to be unemployed and know that you don't have the skill set and don't have transportation and don't have the money to pay for transportation. That is just a vicious cycle of despair. And you know how you feel when you go to places that are beautiful and inspiring. You go home and it motivates you. So that is what I wanted to do for the residents in Chester, to motivate, to help them see their power and to see their light, and to know that we have been oppressed in Chester, and many of us have normalized negative behaviors. So it is a transforming of a mindset that needs to take place. And we need the strength in numbers to help us do this, because, like I said, we're not only fighting systemic issues here, we're also fighting a government who I say are gatekeepers to the structure of white supremacy, because they hold on to things that will benefit the residents here, and they don't release them into our community, but they release a lot of harmful practices in our community.
Thanks so much, Kearni, for all of your passion and commitment. And by the way, just to mention, Kearni did not win the seat on City Council, but she did gain 20% of the votes. So the next stage, I think we're going to move towards victory. And thank you also for working with my students as a partner. And we've had just fabulous experience working in partnership with you, and we will continue to. So I want to now turn the floor to Dr. Kyle Whyte, Professor of Philosophy and Community Sustainability at the University of Michigan. Kyle.
Great, awesome to be in dialogue with you all, and good to hear the powerful words of Kearni and all the work that they're doing. So in terms of environmental justice policy, I work in the context of tribal nations, and I'm a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. I live and work here in our homelands in Michigan. Potawatomi people, we're Anishinaabe people, and we're all over the place, not just in the Great Lakes region, but like the tribe I'm enrolled in was relocated to Oklahoma. And so, for me, the core of my work is empowering Indigenous people in climate justice. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the issues that I'm working through right now in my role on the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. One of the things that's really important to note is that, it was Black, Brown, and Indigenous people that put the Biden-Harris administration in office. One of the organizations I'm part of, the Anishinaabe Caucus, we're a power building organization, and it was started by some amazing folks such as Andrea Pierce. And, we turned out a lot of people to vote, a lot of Native people in Michigan. And Michigan's a swing state, and it was a state that Trump did very well in previously. And so it was really the Black, Brown, Indigenous voters that came out and made the huge difference. And so when the Biden-Harris administration finally came in, they had a number of environmental justice policies, because that's what our voters wanted. And we understand environmental justice as it relates to a number of issues, health and culture, and having access to green spaces and culturally relevant spaces and environments. And one of the things that the Biden-Harris administration developed was this Justice 40 policy. And in theory, the Justice 40 policy does some things that I think are important to note. Its official wording is that 40% of the benefits, again, I emphasize benefits, not saying clearly defined, 40% of the benefits in most major environmental investments, energy being one, or clean water infrastructure being another, workforce development tied to climate resilience and energy infrastructure. So 40% of the benefits of all of those investments must go directly to communities that the United States deems to be disadvantaged. And so again, one of the things with the policy that's important, before I get into some issues with how it's been rolled out, but one of the issues that's important is it's actually addressing this fact that many of our communities were left out of every major infrastructure investment that the US ever made. Indigenous people, for example, if you look across the decades, anytime the US made an advancement in something, whether it's electrical grids or clean water, they would engage in that with privileged communities or many white communities, but Native people, Black people, and other brown communities would be completely left out of those investments. And so we confront a situation where environmental justice is both the fighting against excessive levels of pollution and harm, and the creation of our own self-determination, like Kearni was talking about very significantly in what they shared, building our own self-determination. And self-determination includes infrastructure, but infrastructure not in the way that racial capitalism and patriarchal forms of development have defined infrastructure, but a way that arises from our cultures, our community values, and the wisdom we have from living in these lands for many generations. And while I know that for Native folks, we often talk about how we've been here for thousands of years, right? Many Black and brown communities have been here for quite a few centuries as well. And so I think that land-based wisdom that so many of our communities have is absolutely critical to determining what infrastructure means to us, what it means to engage in infrastructure development. So this policy was really ambitious when the Build Back Better Act was on the table, because it would have applied actually to the $555 billion that were in the last version of that bill before it failed, that would have been for climate change. And it also is a policy that applies to all current federal spending. But one of the issues that the policy has, and one of the directions that we need to go to change policy, is that the Justice 40 initiative, even though it's in play and even though it's enshrined by Executive Order 14008, it actually can't be implemented because the US government actually needs to change the way that it understands what it means to roll out an initiative like this. And the way they set it up has sort of an hourglass shape. At the top of the hourglass, where the sand is, you've got all of these resources, billions of dollars in infrastructure investment. At the bottom of the hourglass, you have the justice and equity issues. You have the communities that have been left behind for generations by previous infrastructure developments, who face legacy infrastructure problems and other environmental injustices. And so you've got a lot at the bottom of the hourglass, you have a lot at the top of the hourglass, but the US government did not invest anything in the actual middle of the hourglass, right? And it's made it so that the actual Justice 40 funds trickle so slowly that very few communities, even though it's been a year, can say that they even know what Justice 40 is, and that they even have a pathway for being able to actually benefit from what should be billions of dollars of infrastructure funding. And so, for example, the council I sit on is supposed to make Justice 40 recommendations for all federal agencies, all of them. And there's actually more agencies that we need to comment on than we have members on our volunteer advisory committee. The Council on Environmental Quality, an agency in the White House which oversees the NEPA Act, they have like just a few people that are working on environmental justice, and they're actually supposed to coordinate the Justice 40 effort across all agencies, not just environmental protection agencies, all agencies, every single one. Agencies many of us have not engaged with before or don't know that much about. Moreover, states who are in the position to receive Justice 40 funds, depending on the politics in that state, they can choose to block the funding. They can choose to not pay attention to it if they don't feel that they're mandated to do anything. They can choose not to invest in staff and policies that would make it so that communities that needed it and that put some of these people in office that are elected officials in state would actually receive the funds. There is no federal infrastructure to make sure that things like workforce development within communities actually occurs. And so in the middle of the hourglass is where you need to open things up so that the sand falls a lot quicker. But because there's so little there in the middle of the hourglass, private industry and philanthropy have then criticized the government and wanted to come in and take advantage of the Justice 40 policy. And so in terms of private industry, there are many companies now that want to control the data that determines who's disadvantaged and who's not. Well, why do they want to do that? Because if they control that data, if they control that information, then they can make the case to federal agencies about where investment should be occurring. And then they can coordinate with their other partners and collaborators to then create a very profitable business ecosystem. And so this thin middle of the hourglass has actually created a situation that can be very exploitive. And it's a realignment of the regulatory system, which is actually no different from what happened. I know many of you were there at the ground level when some of these things occur, but what happened when public participation policy began to become a more focal point within the regulatory process, right? Public participation, huge, key, and important, but just as quickly as it was established as a way of doing business within regulation, it gets co-opted. It becomes shallow and hollow. It's not fully implemented in meaningful ways. And private industry then attempts to have its own public participation activities, its own puppetry, as an attempt to show that it is fulfilling the spirit of what public participation is supposed to mean. And so right now we're experiencing another one of these realignments of the regulatory system, and it's centered around infrastructure, it's centered around workforce development, and it's centered on the importance of being able to know data within communities so that infrastructure investments can be strategically made. And just going back to what I had said at the very beginning, on the one hand, this is an amazing policy because it gets at aspects of environmental justice that people oftentimes had excluded in some of their assumptions, whereas for a long time, communities, including many tribes, had actually been thinking about environmental justice in this way, self-determining our own infrastructure. But on the other hand, even when we have really good policy ideas, we have to compete with all the exploitative actors that really want to get in on the action and just realign power. And so that the powerful people, they change. The power doesn't change, but some of the people that are the ones that we know to be the powerful ones, they change. And we're seeing new actors coming in right now. And we're seeing a change in the regulatory process. And it's important as advocates that we stand up to this and that we call it out and that we do what we can to stop a problematic realignment that's going to continue to disempower communities.
Well, thank you so much, Kyle. I'm wondering if you either now or later in the conversation can speak to some recommendations or suggestions you have for communities like Chester to be able to stand up to this power realignment. What are the strategies for doing that?
Sure, happy to discuss later.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to turn the floor now to Dr. Ana Baptista, who's a professor of professional practice in the Milano School of Policy Management Environment at the New School in New York City. Ana?
Thank you, Giovanna. And apologies to all of you for joining late. The universe conspired this morning along with my computer to get me here late, but I'm here and I'm very, very happy to be in this community with you and see so many amazing colleagues and comrades, Dr. Whyte and Jacqui and many of you. I was just going to speak to maybe one or two of the prompts around my own experience working in a coalition in New Jersey with environmental justice activists pushing for more meaningful environmental justice laws that protect communities that have historically been overburdened and been the subject of quite a bit of environmental racism in terms of the concentration of industrial pollution. New Jersey is a very industrial state with a long legacy of racial residential segregation and income inequality. And communities in Newark, Trenton, Camden, Rahway, all across the state have struggled to stop the continuous litany of polluting industries from situating, concentrating, and growing in our communities for many, many generations. And this is not a unique dynamic. Of course, we know that in places like Chester, many of the same industries, in fact, the same corporations like Covanta incinerator are located. And so there's we're a relatively small state, so we actually have a very tight-knit community of environmental justice activists who have been doing environmental justice work for a long time before, I would say, it became sexy. I feel like, 20, 30 years ago, when we were protesting outside the DEP, I remember I was a young student and, we made cardboard boxes in the shape of coffins, and we protested outside the state regulatory agency over the permitting of a cement factory in Camden. They thought we were crazy. They're like, this is business as usual. And there's no such thing as environmental injustice, prove it, right? There was a lot of pushback that whether this thing called environmental injustice even existed. They didn't even want to name it. But now everybody talks about environmental justice. It's in every agency report and policy. It seems quite ubiquitous, but what does it really mean? Because after 30, 40 years of having the same arguments about we don't want any more pollution in our communities, the same exact permitting decisions were being made in the same exact way. And state agencies would say to us, well, we don't believe we have the authority, the legal authority to say no to industries on the basis of cumulative impacts. The EPA has not given us this authority. The Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act doesn't give us this authority. Now, we disagreed, we being environmental justice activists in New Jersey. Among us, there are lawyers and teachers and many different activists who've done this for a long time. And we believe that they did have the legal jurisdiction with existing laws to say no, to use their discretion. They disagreed. And so we spent over a decade trying to craft legislation, both at the state and federal level, that spoke directly to giving the authority to state agencies, federal agencies to say no on the basis of cumulative impacts in EJ communities. In New Jersey, we had a Republican governor for a long time. And so we spent 8 years struggling to even raise these issues. In those 8 years, the governor of New Jersey actually built 4 major power plants, all in EJ communities, fossil fuel plants. And so we turned our attention to local advocacy. So we actually passed an environmental justice ordinance in the city of Newark, and in the city of Camden also passed a similar ordinance. And we did that because we thought, let's take our political work locally where we have potentially some organizing base and some accountability with, we had a new mayor, Ras Baraka, who was sympathetic. But we had to push, and we pushed for 4, 5, 6 years to get an environmental justice ordinance in Newark. And then we were able, with the passage of time and the democratic changeover in the state legislature, we were able to find a sympathetic, not only sympathetic, but really a leader in one of the state legislators, Troy Singleton, who worked with us to really champion a good bill. There had been a lot of EJ bills in the past, but they didn't have any teeth. In other words, they said, let's study cumulative impacts, let's do an analysis, let's create some maps, let's add more public participation. But none of those laws said, oh, you must use cumulative impacts in decision-making and take it into account and potentially say no to industries. And so Troy Singleton, Representative Troy Singleton, actually worked with us to craft the bill very closely that actually said the state shall it must consider cumulative impacts in communities that are overburdened. And we did a lot of work in our coalition to craft the language of that bill so that our communities were covered both by income or race or linguistic isolation. And we did that purposefully because we wanted to cover as many communities as we could. And to be honest with you, the political will to do this type of very strong bill only came about because we had a confluence of events, not just a Democratic governor and a legislator that was interested, but we had over 13 years of working on this policy, mobilizing our communities and trying to build a coalition, not with environmental organizations. We did not build necessarily these coalitions with the traditional NGOs and the environment movement. We actually built those coalitions with the NAACP, with the Latino Action Network, with social justice groups throughout the state that were not traditionally involved in environmental policymaking, but they represented the same communities that we were working with and in. So those were really important coalitions that we built, and we asked the environmental NGOs to stand behind the EJ coalition and take our leadership on the crafting of this bill, because they did not speak for those communities and they did not represent those communities. And so, surprisingly, they actually listened. I have to say that, because they actually stood back and let the EJ coalition really lead on the crafting of this legislation. But as I said, the confluence of events wasn't just the political moment, it was also the murder of George Floyd and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement and COVID, the COVID pandemic that was devastating our communities. And those things really opened up an opportunity to hold people accountable to the rhetoric that Black Lives Matter. And here we had a bill in a Democratic legislature and a governor that's talking about racial justice. And this was a bill that said, okay, we'll put your money where your mouth is. And really that helped us push this forward in an aggressive way that probably might not have happened otherwise. Anyway, I just say all that because I think there's, there are many times that it seemed like impossible to pass a really strong bill in the state of New Jersey at any level, local or state level or federal level. But I think the coalition stayed together, stayed strong, built our mobilization and our partnerships with sort of non-traditional groups. And that really helped us. And I believe that there's some lessons there, some insights that I think might be helpful. And we're certainly working with a lot of groups in other parts of the country, EJ groups, sharing our lessons learned and helping in any way we can with the lessons that we learned from doing that policy at the state and local level. And also we were involved with Senator Booker on the EJ for All Act at the federal level as well. So we have some experience there that I'm happy to share more about if folks are interested.
Thank you so much, Anna. Absolutely, folks are interested. And of course, we have here, again, in the sister city to Newark, New Jersey, and Chester, we have several amazing activists who are running for public office. We'll hear later from Carol Kazeem, but we would love to have these conversations. So thank you so much. So I want to now turn the floor to Ms. Jacqui Patterson, who is the director of the Chisholm Legacy Project and former director of the NAACP's Environmental and Climate Justice Program.
Thank you so much. Yep. Okay, great. Can you see and hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So thank you so much. It's really just an honor to be on the panel with everyone and to follow the great comments that have already been made by Kearni and Kyle and Anna, Sister Anna. So yeah, as they robustly demonstrated in their comments and the amazing work of the host, the Chester Residents Concern for Quality Living, who through their name circle for short demonstrates their embrace of the need for a circular economy, and they're already beginning to model how that's happening. And we see that as alternatives to the fights in which so many have engaged over the decades against toxic donuts, cancer clusters, sacrifice zones, and so forth. We've made progress in stopping the bad, and yet we still have a long way to go. At the same time, when it comes to building the new, the laws and the policies used to advance solidarity, economy, principles, and practices are on the rise. And that's what we're excited about. And so we're definitely here for it. The Chisholm Legacy Project's role as a resource hub for Black frontline climate justice leadership is to advance and support and scale community rootedness and solidarity economies. As we continue to fight the bad, we see a living circular economy as a critical brick on the path to Black liberation. And more broadly, as we join arms with our brothers and sisters, we see this as a key, as they say, to liberty and justice for all. So I want to talk about some of the existing examples that we're working towards scaling, that great folks are modeling around the country as an alternative to housing insecurity that proliferates in too many of our communities. Community land trusts is a great model for affordability, for living in harmony with the land, and for cooperative ownership. Groups like the Earthseed Collective is a center for community resilience through cooperative ownership of land and resources. And I want to just kind of give words from them so they can speak in their own voice, not just me speaking about them. They said, "We are a transformational response to systemic oppression, committed to centering people of color and other communities pushed to the margins. Our mission is to remember and reimagine our relationship to ourselves, to each other, and to the land in pursuit and practice of collective liberation." So I wish I could show you an image of their beautiful faces and how they are in community to each other. You can just, it comes through when you're in community with them. So as an alternative to food insecurity, which they're also working on with the Earthseed Collective, and the domination of big ag, who are doing things like producing genetically modified foods and single cycle seeds that work against literally the very laws of nature. We have groups like people like Leah Penniman in her group, the Soul Fire Farm, that is modeling what it can look like to really live in close connection with the land and enjoy the abundance that the land produces for us. At the national level, we have folks like Dara Cooper with the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. It's helping models like that of Leah Penniman and like the Earthseed Collectives to really go to scale. As an alternative to energy insecurity, including the fatal energy shutoffs that are happening around the country, where people are paying the price of poverty with their very lives when their electricity is shut off for non-payment and they use a space heater to heat their homes, or they're using if their oil and gas is cut off, or they're using candles to light their homes. People have literally burned down their homes and paid the price of not being able to pay a couple of $60 utility bills with their very lives, while the people who own these companies are making on average $9.8 million in compensation, a single person, and the shareholders are making millions and millions of dollars in profits. And we see the pollution from the fossil fuel economy that's impacting the health and well-being of the frontline communities that host these fossil fuel operations, not to mention their role in driving climate change that's harming us all. So the solidarity economy models, such as community solar, provide affordable, clean energy while supporting local communities. We see that work with native renewables in California, where they've transitioned from the Navajo generating station, one of the biggest, most polluting coal-fired power plants in the country, to a Navajo-owned solar farm. And then we have groups like the Local Clean Energy Alliance also in California, folks like the Black Mesa Water Coalition in North Dakota, and in Washington, D.C., groups like Solar United Neighbors are helping this to become the increasingly the more moving us towards the norm. Energy policies such as the Future Energy Jobs Act in Illinois, the Offshore Wind Bill in Maryland, and the Portland Clean Energy Fund also model how we can utilize power policies to build power and to build the types of models of the types this community-owned solar and otherwise to proliferate. And they did this. The success of those three policies in particular was through the coalition building, through bringing folks who are formerly incarcerated, folks with labor, folks with gender justice groups, really all coming together and making sure that the policy represents the needs and the interests of each of those different sectors of society, using multi-solving approaches that include job creation, that include community economic development, and also environmental protection through clean energy, and also energy and affordability and access for all. So all of that included explicitly in these policies was a key to the success and to the building and the strength of the coalition. As an alternative to the threats to the sacred waters, as well as the travesty of water insecurity in a world that is 2/3 water, as well as an alternative to water privatization and the human rights atrocity of water shutoffs, we have groups like the Water Protectors, such as the Gwich'in Steering Committee in Alaska, who have been battling the Red Dog Mine, which has violated the Clean Water Act 800 times. While other in the human life, and it's really the very epitome of corporate personhood, having better rights than even humans, in terms of where we have these 3 strikes laws with even the most petty of crimes. So we have groups like We the People of Detroit, who model community participatory practices that center water access, affordability, and quality as basic human rights. As an alternative to landfills and incinerators that are poisoning our air and water, we have the work of Circle and the work of Gaia, the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, and Zero Waste Detroit, and a group I recently came to know called Meeble that actually creates, that reuses materials and creates durable furniture, which is interesting. And other groups who are fighting the bad by blocking permits, shutting down polluting facilities, but then advancing the good in terms of circularity of producing durable goods and reusing materials, reducing in the first place, as our sister said. As an alternative to punitive immigration policies that result in children in cages or people being greeted by officials on horseback using their reins to herd human beings. When the US is 4% of the global population, yet 25% of the emissions that drive the very climate change that's driving people from their lands and their homes to seek not riches, but just survival. So in the words of Warsan Shire, she's a Kenyan-born Somali poet, no one puts their child in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. So as an alternative to the narratives of scarcity and in recognition of the abundance that we have in the United States, the Dream Defenders and others are seeking more equitable, humane, and welcoming immigration policies. While groups like Grassroots International and Grassroots Global Justice advance finance, trade, labor, and other policies that seek to end the practices around climate change and global economic domination through advancing finance, trade, labor, and other policies, so that we don't have these circumstances that are driving people from their lands in the first place. And as an alternative to the corporatocracy, where industry exerts control over politicians and policies, over regulations and regulators, over courts and court decisions, we have folks like Kearni Warren, like our inspiration for the Chisholm Legacy Project, Shirley Chisholm, who ran on the slogan, unbought and unbossed. We have groups like the Democracy Initiative and Move to Amend, who are working to de-link the influence of moneyed interest and the courts. So in closing, in addition, and as a complement to our hyper-local work on the ground of the Chisholm Legacy Project with communities, facilitating the development of vision and strategy and action and resource plans, we're developing a model repository of these model policies called BALIC, as an alternative to ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council that puts out so many of the harmful policies around prison privatization, school privatization, water privatization, and everything else bad in the world. We're developing BALIC, which is a Black American Legislative Equity Council. So through this database, we're working to uplift these examples of policymaking that support just transition. We're also drafting model just transition policies where there are gaps. We'll work to support those on the front lines of, who are pushing for policy change so that these policies and practices and principles become the norm. It will take that circle that we talked about at the beginning that our host model in terms of linking arms and solidarity and interconnectedness and in cooperative collective action. So we participated in the formation of the Just Transition Lawyering Project, which in support of movement embodies these principles and practices. So I'm really quite honored to be followed by Dorcas Gilmore as an awesome catalyst facilitator and model of just transition lawyering in action, and as a dear sister friend. So I'll hand it back to you, Giovanna. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacqui. I always am out of breath when you visit Swarthmore or talk to my students, and we hear how many, despite the still need to fight the bad that obviously is nationwide, worldwide, that there is so much happening, and that we all can create those ongoing stories together. So thank you. We will certainly be in touch. So
I'm live now, Giovanna.
all right, Zulene. We're
It's so
great
nice
to
put a
see you,
face to
Zulene.
you. What are you saying, lady?
Yeah, I'm just saying we're happy that you're here. We're happy to see you, and I hope that you have been able to be listening to.
People will get it together. Hey, Carol. Hi, Kazeem.
So yes, Carol has joined us too, which is awesome. So what we have, we've had also have some C4 students who have joined us. So what I would like to do, because the C4 students have to leave in a few minutes, is have the students speak first. Then I'll move it to Dorcas, who will tell us a little bit about the just transition lawyering and the work that they are doing. And then we will sort of go to Carol. Kazeem, we'll bring it full circle, so to speak, back to Chester, and then open up the conversation. So I want to, yesterday, Zulene, after we heard from the two C4 students, Chantal and Tyler, who are both graduating seniors, so they will be leaving, even though we mentioned that once you've built a relationship here with Circle and in Chester, you will always be part of the community, so you'll be back. But Zulene wanted me to ensure that some of the students who will not be graduating, who will still be around, who are involved with C4, get a chance to talk about what they see as their participation and their sense of the future of C4 supporting the goals of environmental justice in Chester. So I believe we have Chris Folk and Sarah Reyes, who will speak for a few minutes about what's up with C4, the organization that is supporting the work of Chester. Can you unmute yourselves?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a junior at Swarthmore. This is my first year really being involved in C4, and I think it's been really exciting to kind of see all these people come together at Swarthmore with like a common cause. Last semester, through one of Giovanna's class, I helped put on this event that essentially was trying to educate and appeal to children and school-age kids and talk about environmental justice. And I think as C4 has begun to have conversations about what we want to see in the future, we really want to start appealing to kids in high school and middle school and elementary school, and really appeal to youth in Chester. I mean, yeah, these connections are what are going to allow us to like bring this into the future and build deeper connections within the community. I think we're all very aware of our position of going to like pretty rich institution kind of removed, and we want to be very cognizant of how we approach our work and be in this position of empowering rather than trying to bring in outside solutions and figure out ways we can fit in. So as the organization C4 kind of comes back online, and we're getting a lot of like just really brilliant people in the organization, these conversations and connections are going to start are being had, and connections are going to be built. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. And Reyes, are you able to unmute yourself now?
Yes. Hi, I'm Sarah Reyes. Sorry, I have a little bit of background noise. I'm not in the ideal place to be speaking, but hopefully people can hear me. Yeah, thank you, Chris, for sharing that. I'm a first year at Swarthmore, so I also just joined C4 this year. And I think for me, it was really, really beautiful and incredible to see so many young people deeply engaged and committed to environmental justice organizing as led by folks in Circle, and really rooted in local conditions and local leadership and like the history of the organizing that's been going on for such a long time. I think, yeah, building off of what Chris was sharing, I'm hopeful in the next couple of years that we can do more work to move resources from Swarthmore to support Circle's work. We've started doing a lot of that. Tyler and Chantel spoke about it yesterday, how we can access the resources of an institution like Swarthmore to support the work that Circle is doing. And also moving that into kind of our personal relationships too. How can we build relationships of reciprocity and mutual aid structures between Chester communities and communities at Swarthmore, and really try to help like more folks at Swarthmore build deep relationships with the broader community of Chester. It's amazing that we have these close relationships with Circle, but I think we've talked a lot about too, trying to embed more deeply in the full kind of movement ecology of Chester, and support kind of in any way that we can. Yeah, so thanks for listening. We're really excited to keep working with Circle.
Thank you guys so much. I cannot tell you how excited I am because there will be a continuation of C4 because of people like Chris and Sarah and so many others who are just committed to making sure that they broaden their circle and their perspectives on life. As I have told the students that I meet with, that this is a two-way street. We are not an organization where we're going to give you a task and just tell you what to do. We don't have time to babysit you, but we also want to give you the freedom to give us new ideals, to express yourself and to see things and to direct us also as Circle. There has been some extremely innovative work that have come out of C4. C4 is the Campus Coalition Concerning Chester. I'm glad that they chose that name. We didn't pick it. We didn't inform you guys. That happened many years ago. But it is a good relationship because we don't live in a bubble. When you all are done with your education, you go into a world that is full and diverse. And like I said, they will teach you practices and protocols and processes in college. I'm going to give you real life stuff. And it's going to make you a better human being because of it. You already are, you're awesome. You guys are awesome. And what you give a community like Chester, we could never pay back. You give us access to your brains. You give us access to the technical things that you're learning at school. you give us access to information, and you can pull data and information together for us that we would not be capable of doing, time-wise or technologically wise. We there's just a disparity, but it is wonderful. And to see the relationships that are going to be built, not only for you guys, but for our kids. Our kids need that base broadened too. They need to see that there's a whole different spectrum of the world with different people, different ideals, different colors, different nationalities. And it's a great thing. So I see my dude coming on. Hey, Tyler.
So,
Tyler is one of our graduates. He's going to Boston. But I'm glad it's Boston instead of Berkeley. He'll only be a couple of hours away when I have need of him.
So thanks, Zulene, for lifting up the important work of the students. And I will say that I spoke with Will Jones, who spoke yesterday, who had just gone yesterday during Earth Day to Lincoln University, one of the historically Black colleges and universities in this area, and said that there was so much Earth Day stuff happening, and that we need to sort of be better at reaching out to actually two of the HBCUs that are nearby, also Cheney University. So thank you so much. So I'm going to turn the floor now to Dorcas Gilmore, the principal attorney at Gilmore Kandar Law Firm, and also a member of the Just Transition Lawyering Network. So Dorcas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Giovanna, and thank you for the invitation. This has been an amazing conversation. It's so great to be with folks who really understand our charge and our purpose here, and to follow, if I might say, Ms. Zulene, and the call to action in terms of all of us being committed to learning and connecting in our communities. Really appreciate that, and appreciate the students who are showing up in the community where you are, which is the charge for every human being, and is the only way that this work is going to happen. Thank you to Circle's work. Amazing to hear about the multi-decade work that has been underway and reflects the dedication across communities. And thank you for this amazing panel, sharing just the range of work across the country. It's always heartening on a Saturday morning to hear about good people doing good work where they are. And so I'll talk a little bit about the Just Transition Lawyering Institute. I'm in Baltimore, have been here for the past 18 years. I'm a native Floridian and have the experience in my own community of the kind of environmental injustice that is the focus here. And through that understood that it was only through organizing. It was only through the community having its voice united, only through collective action. And then those who, like the folks on this panel, who were willing to offer their institutions, their privilege to support, in my case, a Black farm worker community that had been struggling and is still struggling to have the kinds of basic services that we're talking about here today. And so for me, this is also personal, and it's important that we root this work in our personal experiences and that we all have experiences to bring to bear. Jacqui, amazing sister, friend, and as you hear from her every time she speaks, phenomenal advocate in this work, laid out a framework for, in addition to blocking the bad, that we also are those who have to be stewarding what the future looks like. So what a regenerative economy actually looks like. I'm sorry, I'm a little sick, so my voice might go in and out. And that there's lots of that work happening as well. And so my work is focused on building the regenerative economy, growing the regenerative economy, in alignment with other lawyers who are committed to that as well. And so as a part of a Just Transition Lawyering Institute, we are working with 60 practicing lawyers from about 25 states and Puerto Rico to think about what the students are thinking about now. How do you utilize your education and your skills to actually do what is in service of community and frontline communities leading what that looks like. The Institute is really a 14-week program where these practicing lawyers have committed to really relearning, retraining, reorienting around what it means to be in service of frontline communities where they live in their region and across the country. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, I'm sorry, I'm having allergies as well, what the curriculum looks like. So what does it mean for lawyers to actually think about reorienting from the extractive economy to a regenerative economy? And why is that important in the context of what we've been talking about today? And what do we mean by that kind of reorientation? So the curriculum of the Just Transition Lawyering Institute has 4 parts. It is a fall and a spring curriculum. And in the fall, which is past, we talked about 2 major themes, from exploitation and extraction to reparations and sustainability. And in that, it is really learning things that, even though I was a law teacher, that you had to find just, the right course to talk about what this country is rooted on in terms of extraction and the role of the law in that. And so this curriculum focuses on the historical background and ways that colonialism, that racial capitalism shape the climate crisis, and the way in which lawyers even understand our roles in reference to this work. So how do we unlearn and relearn what these tenets really are, and the roots of the extractive economy? So that was the first element of the fall. The second is that law is often talked about as a sword and shield. And that the power to protect, the defensive work of ensuring that organizations like Circle that are holding protests and are doing direct actions, that they have the kind of support that they need as legislatures like in my home state of Florida are attacking even the right to protest injustices that are in our communities. So how can lawyers and law be used to really think about, yes, domestic, environmental, and climate policy and climate litigation, and the ways in which we ensure that those who are in community saying what is right, standing up for what is necessary for their own communities, that they're supported and have lawyers who are able to stand behind and stand with them as they say what they need. In addition, thinking about the role of lawyers in equitable disaster recovery. As we know, the climate crisis is disproportionate impact in our communities in time of human created and natural disaster. Also requires our response. And so the fall was focused in that way. And then the spring, we are now talking about building the new. And we use the language of building the new, but for many of our communities, this is going back to the old. It is actually thinking about what does it take to support the kinds of practices that Jacqui lifted up that are happening all across the country that promote and enable and are a circular economy in local places. And so that means really understanding community self-determination and community power building. And what are examples of community governance, collective stewardship of land, cooperative finance? What does that look like? What's the role of the law and the role of lawyers in that? And then all of this requires healing and requires reparations in order to move into the new. And so what are the legal tools that support a reparative community healing approach? And what are the practical things that lawyers can do to advance a just transition? So that is the work of the Just Transition Lawyering Institute, which is building a network of lawyers that will have had a level of reorientation and retraining and reconnection to the power of the law as a tool in service of and with frontline communities. And in that work, I would say our calls to action are really to understand the law as a tool, right? That it is not the end, that we're not actually seeking legislative and policy change as the goal, but that it is a means to the kind of society and communities that we all deserve. And that particularly for lawyers and advocates to be more creative, to kind of open our minds and see the vision that communities see for themselves, and to be in service of that. And then really, as the students have demonstrated beautifully, it's to start from where you are. There's work to be done everywhere. And so that we all have the opportunity to do something now, and to do it starting from wherever we find ourselves in the world. And so I will stop there and look forward to continue conversation.
Thank you so much, Dorcas. And just inspiring words about the idea of the law or lawyering be in the service of social justice and frontline communities. I know that's something that our students who are interested in going to law school themselves are very committed to. And so certainly being in touch with this institute will be an important way for them to see this in action. So thank you so much. I'd like to now ask Carol Kazeem to sort of, we're so glad that you were able to make it today. I know that you just heard about a terrible loss, but thank you for joining us, Carol. And Carol is a Chester resident, an activist, and a candidate for the Pennsylvania State Representative. And I'd like to turn the floor over to you, Carol, to share your thoughts about moving forward and the future of environmental justice, the future of a regenerative economy for Chester and beyond. So the floor is yours, Carol.
Thank you, Giovanna. I just want to thank everyone. And yes, was a little off this morning, but the fight has to honestly continue still. So even through ups and downs. But I just want to thank everybody for the work that they do and have done. And even myself have became a little bit more informed after listening to some of the speakers and the work that they do in different, communities. So thank you for that. Honestly, I was one of those residents, that here in Chester, still here in Chester, that wasn't really educated, when it comes to environmental. And when we say even environmental, just even the way that we live, here, the way that we treat our community, that all played a factor in our environment. And watching, Ms. Zulene, I remember seeing her when I was a little younger. I ain't gonna tell y'all her age, but it's something where when you watch.
She doesn't know my age. It's just for all of you all.
I thought she left.
Yes. It's a
I was trying to leave out the
guesstimation,
younger part.
whatever.
I was a little younger. But when you watch, women or individuals like her who are fighting different fights, you're young to where you don't really know, but you're always curious. You see them, so you remember it. And I felt like I remember hearing at periods of time where I remember hearing, I think it was my grandmother or aunt or someone saying, "Oh yeah," and this is crazy because I wasn't even, I was around, but I wasn't really looking into that. And I think they said, "Yeah, she's going to make sure them trucks don't pass by or something. And we gonna get out there with her or something, or lay down or get down on the ground or something to not let them through." When Cavanta was here years ago. And, just thinking about, first thing I thought about was they're going to stand there in front of a truck and the truck is just going to let them, just run them over. Was it that deep? Was it that serious? And now it was right. And now that I think of it, it was definitely that deep, and it still is that deep and serious. And now that I became a little bit more educated, I started participating more in making sure that I'm either, hosting or supporting other efforts around cleaning up our environment, educating people, the younger people, because I was really that young child myself, really just not caring, not really understanding the effects, that Cavanta or other industries that are around played a factor into our health, knowing that I had a child at a young age, and came back to Chester that period of time. My daughter ended up developing asthma when I came back. I was in Ridley at the time. I didn't have any issues. And then I started having a lot of upper respiratory issues going on with her. And, they then said, "Oh, well, she developed asthma." And I said, "Well, somebody just developed asthma at the age of like 7 years old out of nowhere. And again, I still didn't know, that played a factor. Then I had my son, and my son was just born with all types of things going on. And then I was in Chester, and I was actually living, when I got pregnant, I was down there near 291. I was over there on Penn Street, so that was closer. And still to this very day, I still deal with him with seizures and all types of medical issues, and it's not to say that that probably came, but I really believe it contributed into that. And then even myself, I now have so many allergies and upper respiratory, infections as well that I know I did not have, that developed over the last about 10, 15 years now. So I say that to say that it was that deep for them to be in front of those trucks, to not allow them to pass by into our neighborhoods. So myself becoming more educated and understanding why things are the way they are now, why we're looking at more higher cancer rates, Crozier. I can't even amount how many times, probably from when I was a kid up until when I had my daughter and my son, that I probably walked in Crozier so many times and seen so many kids coughing, pregnant women in there before it's even their due time, constantly, breathing issues. It's putting us in a premature death. It's at a point where a lot of younger individuals that I've met with and talked with, even here in our community, do not even want to have children. Not right now, because there's so many major health issues that nobody's listening to. So here I am, and I'm taking the leadership from individuals like Ms. Zulene and Kearni and so many other people, Mike, Will, and C4, and so glad to see students like that, because we didn't have that around for us. Well, maybe Swarthmore, but for us, we weren't really tuned into that. But when I start thinking about the legislation aspect, and I said, well, who allowed Cabana to be here? Who allowed industries to come in and pollute communities like mine, pollute areas like Camden, pollute areas like Detroit, Chicago? And then I said, well, who didn't stop this? But then when you start looking back into who's in their seats, the investments that come out of them, the monies that they make out of that. So it's literally saying that they're putting money over people's lives, the health of the people. And I then said, you know what? I have to educate myself some more. So moving forward, I said, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to be that representative, because the 159th actually services pretty much all of the municipalities that are affected by having incinerators like Avanza right there. I will represent not just Chester, but Trainer, that's sitting right there on the borderline, and Marcus Hook, that have so many pipelines. Every day I'm driving down 291, I see nothing but thick smoke in the air, polluting the air of the residents in their own backyard. And then I have residents who say, well, I've always been around this. This is what we're used to. This is what we're born with. And then we wonder why they have so many cancer rates, why they have so many health issues in their areas too. And then when we think about climate change, we think about our representatives, the General Assembly, even on a Congress level, they don't believe in it. And I know it's hard for sometimes, they don't want to believe in it because of different beliefs. But the truth of the matter is we do have a climate change, which now I believe, and this is why I'm also stepping up, we are now at a public health crisis. We should be at a state of emergency right now. This is out of control. Every day we wake up, every time I turn around, we hear of a new infection, a new disease, a new virus. But yet everyone said we don't know where it's coming from. But here we are, we have scientists, we have the research, we have the data. It is proven. People are walking around as walking testimonies telling you how they thought that they were going to die. And yet we still are at a time where we're saying, no, it's not so. So I know that there may be a few that are representing us in the state, but for Pennsylvania to be still so far behind, moving forward, we have to start seeing more progression. We're going to need leadership that's willing to sit down and at least hear what these organizations and nonprofits and scientists and researchers are going to say. We have to be willing to sit down and look at that data. And that's what we're not seeing. I can't say any representatives that are right now, someone that's a direct contact that Circle can call. Organizations like C4, like students can call and say, this is the issues that we're dealing with. And that's a problem. So I want to make sure that I'm representing those communities that are highly, directly affected by this, not just the incinerator, even just so many fossil fuels companies. My sister, I don't know how many times that she had inspection done and they detected carbon monoxide in her home. And we didn't even really understand or was educated. And we said, well, how did it get in the basement? Well, how do we know it's here? Nothing looks molded. It's in the air. That's what they kept saying. It's not healthy. It's this, it's that. You're going to have to get the kids. And we're like, well, how did this, who didn't detect it? And at that time, she was living right there near Thurlow when it kept being detected. Then Crozier nurses were fighting hard to sit here and say, I remember standing there with the nurses saying, we keep telling them that Cavance is causing a lot of these asthma. Nobody wants to listen to the nurse who went to school. Nobody wants to listen to the doctor who went to school and got the degree. So we need people in place that's going to respect that someone took their time to find out why are we having issues that we're having. That's how we're going to be able to move forward. That's the way to move forward. We have to start looking at more green infrastructures. I understand that the cheap way is probably the way. And I understand that energy to a lot of those that may say, oh, it's going to cost more, but it's honestly going to be worth it. We're just going to have to find a way to balance that for people that may worry about that. But when we get more education, like the other woman spoke before that, really educating people to understand, are we going to keep going cheap and then dying at an earlier age than what we deserve to continue to live? Or we're going to invest that time and put our money efforts to make sure that we could continue to live so we could then see our grandkids and so our grandkids can live. Because if we continue to keep going in this path, then we're going to continue to keep seeing that as the years go on, the lesser of the age the children are no longer going to be here. And that is the problem that I have as a resident in the city of Chester. That is the motivation that I'm going to continue to move forward with. And that is the motivation that I'm going to continue to keep working with organizations like you all to be able to make sure that we're bringing that on the front line. And I know it's only me, and it's about a few of them, maybe in Philadelphia, representatives that are willing to push this. But I believe the more that we can add more people that are willing to sit down and hear the cries of those residents, that are willing to hear the research of these scientists, the data that the students, the organizations are bringing forth, the testimonies of people who've lived it, I believe that we can get somewhere, at least a step stool to get there. So moving forward, I just continue to ask the organizations to continue to still do the work that you guys are doing, because by the grace of God, leaders like myself and others, we're going to continue to keep moving forward with you all and continue to keep pushing that into the limelight. And that's what I'm here planning to do, to continue to move forward. And thank you once again, for all of the work that you guys are all doing. Thank you, Giovanna, for hosting it. And thank you once again for just accepting my tardy. This is something I would not have done today. But this is something that we do have to continue for those that are not here to, push this forward, that believed in this mission. So we cannot let this out. So thank you once again. And I'm gonna turn it back over to you, Giovanna.
No, I'm gonna take the mic from Giovanna because I can. I just want to applaud. It's one thing to not know where your baton is going to land at when your course is over. But I am proud and I am pleased to see the new leadership and these young women and young men who were created in the city of Chester, spreading their wings. And I'm hopeful about the future for our city under this new leadership and new energy that is being cultivated and coming out of the cocoon. And I'm proud. I am so proud of the young women that have been on here with us today from my city of Chester, because everybody has an image of the people that live in Chester, that we're all monochrome. We're either, on drugs, selling drugs, or about to go to jail for drugs. That ain't the case, okay? We got PhDs that come out of the city of Chester, whether they go to school or not. I'm PhD'd in waste pollution. Don't want to be, but I'm there. I just want to encourage Kearni and Carol and Will and the new leadership that's going to push this old guard out, that helps these type of industries come to our city and they welcome them and they cheerlead for them against their own residents. So I thank you all, Kearni and Carol.
Amen, Zulene. Absolutely. And I think, you know, if you were to come to Chester and watch Carol and Kearni and Zulene and Will with a microphone in their hand speaking, you would see what impassioned and empowered commitment to the community and to the future is. And so I thank all of you.
We used to have a slogan in Chester: "What Chester makes Chester."
Mhm.
We're making leaders.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm definitely honored to be working together with community leaders in Chester. And I just want to echo something that Kyle said earlier, that it was Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities that brought the Democrats into power, that brought Biden and Harris into power. And so it's going to be leaders, Black, Brown, and Indigenous leaders from the communities, as we've seen from all of our speakers today, referencing that, including our students, that I think will move us into building the new. We wanted to end a little bit early because we want to ensure that people can make it to the march, to the Environmental Justice March in Chester. So what I'd like to do is to ask each of our panelists to share just a couple of words or a take-home message for our audience today that you would want to leave us with. And anything that has come to mind as you have been listening to the speakers today, and just a take-home message that you would want to leave with us. So I think I'm going to start with Kearni.
Thank you, Giovanna. I just want to say that for people who are new to a movement or activism or advocacy, those of us who are on the front line, this is not just something that we're doing just to say we're activists, we're advocates, or we're just a part of something whenever the wind blows. This is our life. Many of us didn't choose to be here. I certainly didn't choose to be here. My life trajectory was someplace else, far, far away from what I'm doing now. But I am a resident here in Chester, born and raised. As I said earlier, this has been my home for generations. My family has been business owners in here, owning convenience stores, property owners, barbecue owners, educators in the school district, pastors, community activists. So I have a responsibility to those who are not aware of what's happening here. All of us have a responsibility to each one teach one, right? You heard Carol speak, you heard many people speak about, even myself, not being educated on the impacts of the incinerator here in our city that is a form of environmental racism. So when you see people from these frontline and fence line communities out marching and talking, this is not something that we are doing because we take lightly. This is our livelihoods, and people's health, life and death is on a line for the causes that we are fighting for.
Thank you, Kearni. So I'd like, Kyle, do you have some take-home message or final words that you'd like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. In tribal and indigenous traditions, and most of them I'm familiar with, including the one I'm really familiar with, Anishinaabe traditions. We always thought that the best leaders, the experts, the scientists were the people that stayed local. And I think, colleges like Swarthmore, for example, need to fight against that idea that one's success is measured by getting more abstract, getting more regional, state, national, international. And actually to realize that that's like a United States thing and maybe a thing for some other places. But for a lot of cultures in the world, it doesn't check out historically. And it's really messing us up because it means that it's harder to stay in many of our communities because every opportunity is about leaving. And imagine if we could push back against that. Imagine if we could put an end to that narrow conception of success. And imagine what that would mean we'd be able to do in our communities when opportunities for big resources come about.
Thank you for that incredibly important message coming from the university system. Absolutely. I'd like to turn our final comment from Anna Baptista. Anna.
Thank you. Yes, as someone who I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, my whole life, and I was actually, I too thought about leaving home and never coming back, and found myself back home, much like many of you. It's really been my privilege to work in my own home and with my community for all these years. So I'll just say that you all have friends in New Jersey. I also sit on the board for the New Jersey EJ Alliance. I know Melissa couldn't be here today, but I definitely want to convey that we are in solidarity with you, and we are here to support in any way we can, and to be in partnership with you all in your fights, because we have similar fights, and I think we're going to be stronger together, fighting many of these same actors and systems together. So anything that we can do to partner with you all,
Yeah.
let us know. And
Well,
also,
don't get off there. I'm getting right off over at City Hall.
that's mean. Anyway, I'll just leave it at that. And I also work at a university center called the Tishman Environment and Design Center at the new school.
Yeah, I don't come up that way. We'll have to send some money.
And I'll leave my info here in case our center can also be a support to the folks in Chester, because we are always happy to collaborate with community-based groups in any way we can, offer technical support or other types of support to local groups, which we do often. So let us know.
Oh, thank you, Anna. You can count on it. Thank you so much. So I want to turn to Jacqui now. Final comments.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, just again, what an honor it has been to be here with you all, and to really appreciate the fact that everyone is coming to this push for just transition, and from their different perches, and recognizing that every last person has something to contribute to this push, whether it's in one's home or in a space like this, or in one's community, or from the perch of university. And so just appreciating how this is a representation of that. Like everyone is coming from their own place in this move. And also to echo, as Anna said, as the Chisholm Legacy Project, we are very much here for any of the organizations that might be represented here. And as we said, we are a resource hub for frontline leadership. And so we have we want to bring all of that to bear and be in service of any ways that we can be of service. So yes, onward ho. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And standing on the shoulders of the great Shirley Chisholm too. So absolutely. I'll turn it now to Dorcas for final.
Excuse me, I need to interrupt y'all. I'm sorry, because I really got to get to this march because the city is really acting a fool up there. I want to thank everybody. Jacqui, Dorcas, I wish he was up here today, Dorcas. We probably gonna need a couple lawyers when I get up here. They gonna act, they blocking off streets. So we
Really?
can park, they done put barricades up and they up there giving my people hell. So I'm getting ready to take some hell to them. So I gotta go, but I thank everybody. I know we have to be in touch. We have to come up with an allegiance and alliance to support ye all one another. I don't see us anywhere being successful without us doing this. We need to unionize, okay? We need to do something, but solidarity, we know is there. But when they mess with Jacqui, they gotta know they gotta deal with Zulene. When they mess with Dorcas, they gotta deal with me. When they mess with me, Dorcas should be internet call of arms. It should be one blast to go out and say, okay, they messing with the people in Newark. Let's blast them up. Emails, phone calls, protests. Whatever we can do. When the little government down in Washington, D.C., you know why we're not being heard? Because they know we're segregated. We all have, we're busy with life. We're in survival mode most of the time for people of color in America. But we have to get it together. They meet often on how they can beat us. They meet all the time. Even their enemies, the industry enemies, they meet and have think tanks on how to beat us. It's no reason why we shouldn't be doing the same thing. Because we can beat them. We are beating them. We want to beat the incinerator. That's why they're up there acting fools now. But I'll see you guys shortly.
Thank you, Zulene. We'll see you shortly. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
So moving on. It's always working without a net. Dorcas, final comments.
So thank you again. Not too much else to say. I think the panelists have captured it quite well. And I think the only thing that stands out for me is this quote that is, to change everything, it takes everyone. And that we're the people to actually make this happen. We also are standing ready to support in a variety of ways. And that there are a number of lawyers in the region who are interested in learning more and being of assistance. So please do reach out and please share the information related to the Just Transition Lawyering Institute. And
absolutely will do. Thank you so much. I just wanted to give, if a C4 student is still on, do you have a final statement that you want to make? Chris or Reyes?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Just that, we're kind of just joining this fight. I'm at a stage in my life where I'm just becoming aware of all the injustice in the world. And I think the work we're doing today, we're going to be doing tomorrow, and every day moving forward is going to be what really just makes everything okay in the world, I guess. It's a bit hard to be alive sometimes, but joining this fight is, I think, what keeps me going a lot of the time.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chris. Carol, do you have a final statement that you want to make?
Yes, I would definitely love to say, just remember that when you fight a good fight, you're going to be met with opposition. And you're going to have people that's going to step away. So even when you're standing alone, if you really believe in what you're fighting for, and it's something that helps benefit the people, please remember, even if you're alone, just keep going. Don't give up. Don't give up, because at some point they'll join you. So if you're new to activism or you've been doing it before, keep going. That's all I have to honestly say is just keep going, keep showing up, keep going, because the people are going to need you, even if they're not standing out there with you because they may not know or they're afraid. But as I said, they will join you at some point in time. Thank you, Giovanna.
Thank you so much, Carol. And as Jacqui has put in the chat, the important principle of Ubuntu, I am because you are, all for one and one for all. So I think that's a beautiful statement to say thank you to all of our amazing panelists, to all of the participants and attendees who came today, to my co-organizers, Chris and Zulene. Chris, I wanted to make sure if you would like to have a final statement.
No, I just wanted to say thanks to all the panelists today. This is amazing. When we put together this third panel, we were curious as to what happened, the idea of employing folks' imagination, where could it go? But what we see is obviously a shared commitment to the ideas and principles of social justice that make it not imaginary, but really achievable and realizable and in the works as we speak. And that's great to hear, and an amazing way to end this two-day webinar. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you to everyone, and we will be in touch.
Yes.
We will continue to work together. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.